Hello, everyone, and good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight for Monk Chat. So, tonight we have all the way on my left, Ayasoma, then Bante Srasa, then Bante Pamuto. So, good evening so far to Jens and Mary, as well as all our friends who are watching. So at this time, you can start with any questions that you may have for our panel of monastics related to Buddhism, somewhat related to Buddhism, about practice, about the monastery, the monks here, whatever comes to mind. And Jens already has a question. Can you discuss the difference between Dhammachanda and craving to obtain, maintain meditation states? And how to cultivate Dhammachanda and not let become, grow, and cling. Perhaps Bante Pamuto wants to speak about that.
I really like the word chanda, and I really like the principle behind chanda. So chanda is wholesome desire. I think interest is a really good enthusiasm for a subject. So it's not hard to do. It's cultivating a mind state that doesn't get stuck on objects, that instead appreciates the flow of an experience. So like any time when you're hearing a sutta and you start to feel like that enthusiasm, like, yeah, this is good stuff, that is Dhammachanda. So you just want to make that your continuous experience, just build it up. And I've found the best way to do that is really to just continue to expose yourself to Dhamma. So be around people who talk Dhamma and hear Dhamma talks, formal talks given, and go back to the suttas again and again every single day. Like, don't let this state kind of burn down to embers. Just keep it burning. And then there's really no need to worry about clinging if that's what you're doing. Like, there might be point by point, you might get stuck on something, but if the underlying tendency of the mind is to just be like thirsting for the next good Dhamma, then you won't hang on to it too long. You won't get stuck on any one point. You'll just keep being like, oh, well, where's the next teaching coming
from? Thank you. Any of the other two venerables have anything to add? Great. And then Bhavani asks, what is meant by mind? How do we know the mind? I think Ayasoma would like to answer this question.
Do I? What is the question again?
What is meant by mind? How to know the mind?
Well, that's actually a meditation practice in and of itself. So in Chan Buddhism, they have some really wonderful practices of Huato, they call it. I'm probably mispronouncing it. Bante, what is the exact pronunciation of Huato?
Huato.
That one. And the questions, basically what the practice is fundamentally, it's to take some questions and ponder them in meditation. And there's different ways through which one can do that. Normally it's a teacher. It's the teacher that will pick the huato, so the sort of question that the person will be pondering upon. And sometimes, like some of the bhikkhunis that have come to our monastery in the past and have led retreats with us, actually have invited us to pick the one that we felt more in tune with. So they give us a few different options. And they're kind of like in relation to your question. So what is the mind? And really, rather than the answer, then finding an actually like point blank answer, the most interesting part of it is actually the process of really going, analyzing what we think that the mind is. What is our perception of the mind? So sometimes Buddhist practice, rather than giving us rather than the aim of like finding some kind of ontological answers of who are we, what is the mind, what are we doing here. It has a different twist. It has a different sort of purpose, where it's sometimes asking questions to ourselves is more helpful than finding answers given by others. And so actually it is something that I like to do that. The Buddha also recommended it in the Pali Suttas of going through our body first and then all the way up to consciousness and mind to really understand what are we really identifying with. Do we think we are the body? And if we don't think we are the body, what do we think we are? And what are the sort of, what do we think the body is? What do we think the mind is? What is our perception of all of this? So I guess this is what I have to share, but perhaps Bhante Sudhaso has a few more ideas.
Well, I would have answered the question in a completely different style. So I think adding anything at this point would maybe be counterproductive because I found your answer to be quite lovely. So I was going to give categorical answers, but instead you told her to do the questioning of herself, which I thought was quite clever. So I could give answers, but I think it's kind of beside the point now.
And I think Liz may be thinking that Bhante Saraso would be up next to ask this question. Are the previous 6 Sammasambuddhas all mentioned by Shakyamuni in the Pali Canon? And is there always one Sammasambuddha in existence at all times in some realm?
So the Buddha mentions many of the previous 6 Sammasambuddhas at various places throughout the suttas. And in at least one place, he lists all 6 of them in one go. So it's in the Digha Nikaya, the Attanatiya Sutta, from which there are 2 Paritta chants, blessing chants, which are derived. So the shorter Attanatiya Paritta, which is a direct quotation from the Digha Nikaya, and the longer Attanatiya Paritta, which also includes 21 Buddhas from previous eons, as well as the 7 so far in this eon. As for your other question, there are countless universes, countless world systems. At any given time, some of them have Sammasambuddhas. Most of them don't, but some of them do. Currently, there's no Sammasambuddha in this world because Shakyamuni was here and passed away a while ago. We're still living in the influence of Shakyamuni Buddha, but he's not physically with us at this point. But there are some other world systems that do have Sammasambuddhas currently alive. Again, most of them don't, but some do. Did that answer everything in the question?
Okay. Pretty clear. And so the next question I think everyone can take a stab at, because I think people tend to have different perspectives. So Gita Ratnayake asks, I'm not sure what to make of the concept of Mara. I assumed Mara was the defilements, but Mara invaded the Buddha and Arahants who had ended defilements. So can you please clarify the concept of Mara? So maybe we can start with Ayasoma, who's been talking about the Bhikkhuni Samyutta.
Yeah. Mara is our frenemy. So I personally like to take Mara both as a literal being, literal sentient being that comes and tempts us and tricks us and takes different shapes and forms. Sometimes the shape of our parents coming and telling us, well, my mom told me today that she's planning on locking me up when I go to Italy and never leaving me out and never letting me go out to practice Buddhism again. And I was like, what an interesting. It's both tempting and scary because I actually like to be locked up in a room, like with room and board, but solitude and quiet. But at the same time, it's kind of scary that my mom wants to do that and not let me out. But also friends perhaps that go, oh, well, why don't you want to have a beer with us? Or like, how about we go and just have a great time outside? I don't have this anymore because I'm a monastic. So my fellow monastics luckily don't invite me to such things, but that has occurred in the past. But also sometimes it's useful to think of Mara in terms of our own defilements. Yes, you're correct. So our manifestations of greed, hatred, and delusion. So our insecurity coming up, our doubt, self-doubt, going, oh, actually, you're not really a capable practitioner. You're not a good monastic. You're not a good human being. You're not good enough. You should just, give up all of this and do something else. So it can take so many different shapes and form, or fear, to embark in the new, or to do just to make decisions, really, just to be happy, actually. So it's both, I would say, both the sentient being and both our own creation. And in the end, is there even a difference between the two? So the Buddha always says, mind is at the forefront of all things. So that's what I have to share.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that pretty much covers it. The only thing I would add is to mention that Mara is also a category of beings, a category of devas. So normally when we just talk about Mara, we're referring to one particular Mara, who's usually singled out with the name Namochi. So Namochi Mara. But there are many other Mara devas as well, who have similar characteristics, similar traits. Otherwise, I agree with everything Ayasama said.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is even though the Buddha and the Arahants vanquished Mara in terms of the emotions that Mara tries to represent, the reality is Mara was still present in their lives, but as an external force then. So even once we attain a stage of freedom, we're going to continue to be involved with other people's delusion, other people's ignorance. And that's actually, it's a great place to be in terms of like helping the situation. Like when we're not deluded, we can help somebody who is deluded to kind of find the way out of it. So in that way, when the Buddha confronted the armies of Mara, he was already close enough to enlightenment. Was he already enlightened at that point? He was already
the
enlightened.
armies of Mara, that was right before his enlightenment.
Yeah.
And then right after his enlightenment, then Mara came to him and was like, okay, you defeated me. Well done. Congratulations. Why don't you just cease to exist now? Like you've done your job. You achieved your Buddhahood. Why don't you just disappear? And the Buddha was like, please, no, I'm not going anywhere until I have enlightened disciples of both genders, both monastic and lay. So it's like, I'm not going anywhere until I have arhat bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, and well-practicing lay women and laymen. So that's when, as Bhante Pamutta said, that was when the Buddha had completely expunged Mara from within himself. But Mara as an external being was still there to try to harass the Buddha. The difference was that the Buddha was having none of it at that point. At that point, the Buddha was no longer under Mara's control, could no longer be influenced by Mara. So he was like, no, you're not tricking me anymore.
Yeah, so you see this when you've gotten past anger and you actually find you have loving kindness in your heart, and then an angry person comes to you It's like it's just there's nothing for it to land on. So the Buddha and all the arhants, including the bhikkhunis we've been hearing about, could just say, "I know you. I'm not going to fall for it."
Thank you. And then Sierra, good to see you, asks, could you explain the role of lay teachers giving Dhamma teachings? Perhaps Bhante Pamuto? I'm not too sure.
The role?
The role?
Their Dhamma teacher is giving Dhamma teaching. Is this a question mark?
There is a question mark.
In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha is recorded as telling Ananda, the Dhamma will be your teacher when I am gone. So it was customary, even during the Buddha's lifetime, to leave a seat open for him just in case he showed up. But since we know that that's probably not going to happen, in many places they leave a seat open for whoever is going to get on that seat and speak the Dhamma into our present generation. And that person doesn't own the Dhamma, they're not the Buddha, they're not some sort of in some sort of higher position, but they're more like a conduit. They're speaking on something that's always been present, but they are trying to help make it more visible for those of us who are still trying to realize the same thing that the Buddha did. So anyone who gets up in that sort of vulnerable position of trying to speak on universal truth, you can learn something from them, even if they completely botch a sutta reference, or they stumble, or they're lost in delusion. You can still learn from that. All the more, I've met teachers of all different stations, men and women, young and old, who can say really profound things. So, yeah, no question mark in my mind. Listen to them and evaluate what they say. Does it match with Dhamma?
Thank you. And I don't know if this is the same Sierra, but a package showed up with the name Sierra on it, and we have much appreciation for that Sierra. Maybe that Sierra is you.
Sadhu.
Yes. And then Mary says, yesterday was a day to explore one's gratitude for the blessings we have in our lives. I just want to let you all know that you are counted on my list of things I'm grateful for.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yes, we're very grateful for you as well, and that you're very close to us and to the Dhamma.
Mary, also literally, like you're our neighbor.
Yes. And Mary also asks, do you eat the candy I bring you all? Well, a well-known secret is, monks tend to have sweet teeth.
So he's talking about himself when he says that.
So there's no concern when candy appears at the monastery.
There's also no concern if candy doesn't appear, by the way. But it is true, there are some residents here who do appreciate such things.
Like everybody. Except 2/3 of this panel.
Half this panel.
Contemplate that.
Yeah.
Half of this panel.
It got lost in translation.
It's a koan. So thank you, Mary, for asking. Yes, we very much appreciate all your offerings as well. And then Tracy says, hello, thank you all for offering these evenings and answering questions. What's the difference between experiencing the 8 worldly winds and experiencing karma, or the effect of one's actions? Bhante Sudasa?
So it's actually the same. So as we go throughout samsara, making choices, those choices are what we call karma. And every choice that we make carries with it certain characteristics. The most important characteristic is whether it's wholesome or unwholesome. That's the division between good karma and bad karma. And there's additional characteristics. So the Buddha points out in many places in the suttas that the characteristics of the karma that we make then has some effect on the results of that karma. So the result of karma is called vipaka. So vipaka is the manifestation of the results of our past karma. So the 8 worldly conditions, which in later Apocrypha came to be called the 8 worldly winds. The 8 worldly conditions are vipaka. So if you have been respectful and kind and courteous to others, then you are likely to receive praise instead of criticism. You're likely to receive gain instead of loss, pleasure instead of pain, and so on. And conversely, if you've been nasty and not nice and so on, then you're likely to receive discredit instead of fame. You're likely to receive pain instead of pleasure, and so on. But the important thing is when experiencing the 8 worldly conditions is how do we respond? If we respond with desire, aversion, disappointment, elation, depression, and so on, then we're just creating more bad karma, which will lead to even stronger unpleasant experiences. On the other hand, when experiencing any of the 8 worldly conditions, if we respond with equanimity, contentment, non-attachment, then we're generating the karma that leads to awakening. And we will not be negatively affected by those experiences. So, for example, as the Buddha went throughout his remainder of his life after attaining awakening, he experienced a great deal of the 8 worldly conditions. But he wasn't bothered by it one way or the other. When people praised him, he didn't get conceited or inflated. He was just like, oh yeah, of course, naturally people praise a Buddha. Why wouldn't they? And when people criticized him, which happens surprisingly frequently, the Buddha wasn't bothered. He was just like, well, they're just expressing their own defilements and delusions. That's their problem. When the Buddha experienced gain, which happened quite a bit, people were always giving him nice things, then he wasn't overjoyed. He just saw, well, naturally they're doing what is fit for them to do. And other times when the Buddha had very little to live on, it didn't bother him. It wasn't a problem for his mind. So that's what we're aiming at. It's recognizing that experiencing the 8 worldly conditions is just a fact of samsara. Whether you're unawakened or awakened, you still experience the 8 worldly conditions. The difference is that an awakened being does not fall into desire, aversion, or confusion when experiencing the 8 worldly conditions. Okay?
Thank you. And the next question comes from BDW. What role do devas play in Buddhism? What function does remembrance of the devas have in the Eightfold Path? Ayosoma?
It's very interesting that I get this question. Because I don't think much about devas, to be quite frank. Although it's not true, actually. Lately, I was been thinking about devas, but in a more worldly way. So how can I answer this question skillfully? I will start by saying that my mind leans towards scientific materialism. So that is the reason why I don't naturally incline towards contemplating too much other realms of existence, such as devas. But at the same time, I find it very helpful to actually think about it intentionally to overcome this tendency of mind. So I would say that devas, it's important to understand Buddhist cosmology, to understand the realm of different possibilities of existence that are based from our actions. Basically, being born, experiencing certain realms of existence is the product of actions that we've done in the past. So how about